right, I think we'll get started. Welcome, everybody. There might be some other people still joining us as we go through, but they're joining on mute. So wanted to introduce you to John Mannell and Roddy Liang. They're our product managers on WealthServ Insurance and WealthServ Investments, respectively. And what we wanted to do today was show you a couple of ways that you might be able to save some time and energy in features that we've noticed aren't being particularly frequently used. That could be because you are not familiar with it, aren't aware that it's there, not quite sure how it functions, or because maybe you can't find an application for it. So what we'd like to do today is take a couple of real life examples and show you a couple of the features within insurance and investments that might help save you some time, help you reduce some costs, and perhaps help you tackle some of your data management and ultimately serve your advisors better. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to give John Mannell control to talk about some features within insurance that might help.
Okay, so welcome everybody. I think most of you know me. I've met many of you in our in-person user groups that we've had in the past, and certainly just from various other activities and interacting with you all. But as Diana said, I am the product owner for the WealthServ Insurance products. I've been doing that role for a little over a year now, and for the previous 9 years had been somebody who would have interacted with you as a developer on the WealthServ Insurance product. So certainly gotten to know it fairly well over the last few years. During that time, there's been a couple of tools. Well, one tool in particular that I've been a really big fan of, and I've always been trying to encourage our users to make more use of, for just understanding the data that there is in WealthServ, and that's the advanced query tool. And in the last year or so, we've started to roll out and expand the fit tool. So the advanced query and especially the fit tool are things that in our roadmap are prominently featuring as tools that we want to make more and more available, to expand the functionality in them, because it gives you a lot more ability as users of the WealthServ system to be able to, rather than having to submit support tickets, waiting for that, maybe even have some costs associated with that depending on the request, that rather you're able to rely upon that you're able to sort of do these things for yourself, find the information you need for yourself, and with the fit tool now, make updates in bulk to the system. And so for the fit tool, I think some of you may not be fully aware of what's there yet. There's a sort of a two-tier sort of on that system. There's a couple of tools that we have released out to everybody recently, which were for the broker and the policy circle of support updates. But in addition to that, there is a growing suite of additional templates and tools for updating brokers, updating policies, uploading those sorts of things, commission feeds, all sorts of things that are being added to. We're looking at a block of business move is another one of the ones which is in the roadmap for next year, which we also are hoping to get available, which is just going to increase your productivity. And so what I want to do now is, rather than me just talking about things and telling you how awesome WealthServ is actually sort of show you a use case where this is something which has actually recently happened more or less with one of our clients, and just to sort of show you the ways in which you can use the existing WealthServ tools that are there without needing to without needing to consult with our support people to go and maybe get new data mine reports written or anything like that, that this is all stuff that's within your control. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the WealthServ screen. And what we're going to do is, first of all, I'll just explain to you what the situation is that we're going to address. Is most of you are beginning to or are getting many of the book of business feeds. And one of the things which happens with book of business is, of course, that blocks of business, unfortunately, can transfer out to another MGA. Now, some of the carrier feeds that exist right now are providing information about when a block of business transfers out. But even in those cases, some of them are providing that information about when business gets transferred out. Some of the feeds aren't providing that information at all. Now, at the moment, we are in active development to go and get ready for an early release next year to upload that transfer out information when we do receive it. But there still is the scenarios where either the feeds aren't providing it and won't be providing it, or where transfers have happened in the past and the new feed, when we actually get the logic in place, the new features, that's only going to be going forward, not going to be looking back. And so what I want to do is I want to walk through a situation where, as a user, you would have been using the system to receive in-force feeds, and you want to be able to, even without those transfer out enhancements, identify where a block of business has been transferred and then update the system so that all of those policies which have been transferred have a new status, which indicates that that's happened. So the way we're going to do that, sorry, I just got a frog in my throat at the most inconvenient of times. The way we're going to do that is we're going to start off by using the advanced query tool. I will mention, I'm going to be fairly quickly walking through this. I'm not going to be talking about all of the features of the advanced query tool, but for those of you who maybe aren't using it very much, aren't so familiar, or maybe even a little nervous about using the tool, for those of you who haven't been using it at all, I would highly recommend, if you go onto our Confluence site, you will see there was a webinar a month that was done back in October 2017 on advanced queries. I highly recommend that if you just need even a refresher on the functionality that's in advanced query, that's a good place to start. That'll sort of take you through all the functionality, gives you some more use cases as well. So that was the October 2017 webinar a month. So let's start off by, let's create a new advanced query so that we can see what policies may have been transferred out. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off, we've got to give it a name. So we'll just call it the Propel transfer out. Spell that right. And we're going to base this on, we're going to start off with a policy. So we're going to look at a policy and using the policy table, and we'll add, we'll link in another table there just to give us the information that's going to help us identify where have policies been transferred out. And so let me just start doing that. So we'll just add a few fields to this one that are going to be useful for this. I think policy number is always helpful. We'll put in a plan name. We'll put in the status of the policy. Actually, we'll put in the record status as well. We'll put in the status of the policy. The most important information, though, that we're going to be needing to look at is down here. We have some fields such as in-force action, which is going to tell us whether or not a policy record has been either added to the system or replaced on the system by an in-force or a book of business feed. And we'll also put in here the date that it was added to the system and the last time that we saw it. And that's sort of going to be the key field that's going to help us know that there's been a transfer out. What we find with some of the in-force feeds is that there'll be a policy which they starts getting sent to us by the carriers. And then all of a sudden one day, they just stop sending it. Some of the feeds will give a status update to say that there was a claim or something else happened on the policy. In some cases, they just stop sending it. And so what the strategy is we're going to go for here is we're going to say, okay, what we want to do is we want to look at all of the policies which came from in-force. So the first thing I'll put in here is, okay, what's the in-force action? And I'm going to, just to demonstrate some of the strengths of the flexibility there, is I'm going to give it a list of things. I'm going to say I want everything that was added and also everything that was replaced by an in-force feed. Now, in addition to that, I'm also going to, and this is generally with any sort of policy one, is generally you only want to look at the ones that are active in the system. You don't want to be looking at, some of those old deleted records and things. You just want the ones that are active. But where the real sort of key I guess the strength of how this query is going to work is we're going to say, okay, I want to see all of the policies that were added to the system or replaced on the system by an in-force feed, but that we haven't seen for, let's say, the last month and a half or so. So we're saying that I want to have everything where the last feed date on that policy was less than the beginning of October. And So I've put that in the query. One thing I'll point out to you is that with a lot of the advanced queries, and we're not going to get into detail on this, is the functionality also exists within WealthServ that you can automate these queries and have the results of these queries sent to you by SFTP so that you can then consume them at your end. And so for a query like this, you might be thinking, but hang on, you'd have to come back and keep changing the date. Like say a month from now, you were saying, I want everything that was we haven't seen since the beginning of November, etc. Well, there are some features, and these are in that webinar that I was telling you about, where if we wanted to, instead of putting in a date, a hard-coded date like that one that I've put there, there's some various sort of codes that you can put in here, and there's a list of them in that webinar. And here, what I've now said is, I want to see everything where we haven't seen it since the beginning of the start of last month, which happens to be October the 1st at the moment. But if I was to run this query a couple of weeks from now in December, it'll automatically start picking up from the beginning of November instead. So these are just some of the things that you can use with Advanced Query. Anyway, we've put our query together there. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to save and view it. And that will now run, depending on how much data there is. Sometimes it takes a while. And what we've got here, though, is we have got a list of quite a few policies in here. So we've got our sort of policy number and everything else, where these were being told here, were they added, were they replaced to the system? But here's the key, is we can see the dates of the last feeds. And so we can see a lot of these are, quite a few months ago. And as you scan through the, oops, sorry, I forgot to do something just then. Let me go back. I was going to include in this also the name of the broker, just so that we can see who the broker was. So I'm just going to add to that broker. Sorry about that. The account code, and we'll put in the broker name, because what we'll see when we run this is you're going to see that a lot of those are all to do with the same broker on the same day. So let me rerun that now with the broker information on the query as well. And there you'll see down the side here, there is, there's a few different names down there, but mostly it's just a couple of these names. So that's sort of a strong indicator that maybe there's been some sort of transfer out, especially when you see that they all sort of stopped being sent on the same date. So what we're going to do is we're going to export this list into an Excel file, to a CSV file. So I'm just doing that now. I will now open up that CSV file, click on allow there, and I will now bring that across to the screen. I'm hoping you can see all of this. I'm sure someone will tell me if you can't. And here is that same list that we just saw. And you'll see in here that, for example, there are, a lot of different records, all the standard stuff you can do with Excel, of course, we can use on this. But what I'm going to do now is we're going to have a look at this list. I'm just going to throw a filter on there. And, we look at the broker list, we see there's 4 different brokers in there. We see, if we just have a look at the first one, for example, we'll see there, quite a few records for that person. They all stop showing up on the same day. Likewise, we may look at another different broker in there, and we might see that, this one there was only the 1 record. So that one probably wasn't a transfer out. And actually, we see that there is a status on that one of lapsed. And so in that case, in the book of business or the invoice feed, they sent through the policy, they said it's lapsed, they stopped sending it. So that totally makes sense. So what I want to do now is let's just pretend for now that we identified that the first ones under this Adrian were transferred out, the rest of them weren't. So what we would do is we would then say, okay, well, let's delete the rest of those records, because we don't want those records, because we're actually going to use this particular file as an input into the fit tool. So now we have, that's, I think I did delete, I didn't do delete rows. Let me just fix that, sorry about that. And sort by the ID column, and we'll just sort there. Great, and now we've got our list. Okay, so now we have our list, and so we have a whole bunch of policies that are currently within WealthServ with a status of in-force commission paid. Now, without the fit tool, if you wanted to act on that yourself, you would have to go into each one of those individual policies and update the status to transferred or to something else. There's so many different scenarios here, but for this case, you would say, I need to update them now to transferred. And that's obviously going to be quite time consuming. Well, with the fit tool, you can actually we have what we call templates, where we will say there's a certain defined format of data, and you can sort of create information in Excel, save it as a CSV file, and then upload it into the fit tool to do all of the uploads. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to reformat this data so that it is compliant with the policy status fit tool template that we have. And so the way that one works is it has, in it, it has a few different columns there. We don't actually need that column, so I'll just get rid of it to keep things nice and simple. There is the key columns for the template is there's an ID column, which is sort of a unique identifier to the policy, the existing status, which we've pulled from the advanced query, and now we need to tell it what we want the new status to be. So I'm going to add a new status column there, and we will just call that, we want the new status to be transferred. And I'm now just going to fill the rest of the template with that information. And that's it. Now we have the template, now we have the data ready to feed into the tool. So I'm just going to save that. And so we will call that, we'll save that into here. I'm going to call it policy fit 1. And we will get out of there now. I will just close that up, go back into WealthServ. And the fit tool is available and can be seen under the import files screen. So I'm just going to go to import files. I'm now going to say I want to upload that file that I just created. And the way I do that is I say, okay, which one of the various templates do I want to run against? And as you'll see, we have a list of various ones in there, and we're continuing to add to them. The ones that you've probably already seen, if you've looked at the fit tool, would be the broker and the policy circle of support update tools. We're going to use for this one, though, the policy status update field. Sorry, update template. So I'm going to say I want to load one of those. This can be anything we like. I'm just going to call it demo. And I'm now going to select the file that I just created and say I want to load that. And so now I click on upload. So what's taking place now is that file is being loaded into the system. And as you'll see there on the screen, it is now validating the file. It's just making sure that the format that I've provided the file in is correct. And it will tell us in a moment or two whether or not that format is correct. So it's just going through the file right now, and it's now coming back, and it is telling us everything in there is fine. I mean, if we wanted to review what was correct in that file, it's going to tell us that there's a whole bunch of records. They've all been successfully staged. Now that we're happy with that we don't have any errors, we don't need to go back and fix up our file, we can then say, do you want to proceed with the processing of this file? To which I will say, yes, I would. Okay. And now the second phase of the processing is happening, where the WealthServ system is going through that file policy by policy, and it is going to update the status of every one of those policies from whatever it was before, and it's now going to change it to transferred. So obviously a lot quicker than having to go through and manually do those sorts of things. So this takes a little bit longer. You do get a status bar along here. For much larger files, it can take a while. But the nice thing about this particular bit of functionality is you don't have to stay here and wait. If I wanted to go out, do something else, I don't know, have my lunch, do some other work, whatever else, you're able to do that. And then you can come back later and see how the status of this is going. So this particular case, it's not going to take that long. I mean, it's still a bit of work because it is updating those statuses of those policies. Anyway, I can see that my time is pretty well up there already. So I will I'll keep talking as this thing finishes off. It's just about done. There it is. It's now done. It's telling us that all of these policies have been successfully updated. They all now have a status of transferred. So that's it. That's the whole process done. So I think this is just one particular use case. There are hundreds probably of different sort of real life scenarios that you encounter where you might be wondering sometimes, is there a way that we can streamline? Is there a way to automate? That there is a lot of flexibility already there in WealthServ for these sorts of things, and we're expanding on them. So what I will close off with, I don't know if I can't see if I'm even getting any questions at the moment. But what I'll do is I'll just sort of say that, if you are sort of facing some sort of problems, reach out to us, reach out to either me or to the support people, and we can either talk through that there might be some ways of enhancing your experience in being able to do these things for yourself without needing to rely on the turnaround time and, maybe even having to create sort of billable support items and things like that, that you can do these things for yourself. And also, if you have any ideas of things that you find, very, very repetitive, that have to take place a lot, that definitely, let me know. I will, obviously consider them, and we can start to include them in the roadmap. Because as I said, for 2021, there's a couple of other areas that we're also going to be talking about in our next session related to feeds. But definitely the FIT tool is one of the areas that I'm really keen to see get rolled out and sort of have more functionality added to it, so that it is going to enable you all to, to make better use of the WealthServ system. So with that demo, I am going to stop sharing and hand things back to Diana, and maybe I'll find out if there were questions or not. I'm not sure.
Great. Thanks, John. I know that was very quick and dirty, as they say, but kind of gives you a taste of what the combination of advanced query and FIT can do for you. There weren't any questions as yet, John. Just want to remind everybody that there is a chat if you could put your questions in there. We will be taking all of the questions and putting them together in a document sometime after this presentation to make sure that we get back to you if we can't address them today. So the chat is open. If you would like to put a question in there, feel free. The session is also being recorded, so that if you missed some of those steps and want to try to recreate them on your own, we'll make sure that the session is available to you again sometime after this. We'll be posting all of the recordings on our Propel landing page where you initially did your registration. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Roddy.
Okay, so yeah, I'm going to go through the ICT and EFT pad functionality today. First functionality I want to talk about is the in-cash transfer. This particular piece of functionality was introduced back in July or June of this year. And we've noticed there has been some uptake and adoption of this functionality, but there is definitely a lot of dealers that have not been using it where they probably should be or have the opportunity to. So one of the key things about ICT is that it should increase trade efficiency, meaning that any situations where you have to place a sell of one fund company that one of your clients currently holds, and you have to place a buy in another company, it makes that process a lot quicker and a lot faster, and reduces the amount of processing required by your operations staff. So in the old scenario, what usually would happen if you had a situation where you had to do a sell and a buy in another fund company is that you would have to place a sell on T+0, you would have to fax the documentation to the relinquishing fund company, and then you would have to wait for the check to arrive. So that could take a few days, sometimes a week or so, and you really don't know when you're going to receive that check, nor in the situation of T2033 or registered transfers, you don't know when the receiving fund company will receive those funds from the relinquishing fund company. So you really can't ensure when the buy will happen. So on T plus, who knows really. So with the ICT functionality, what we have is the ability for you to be able to place a sell and buy on T+0. All you would have to do is then fax the paperwork to both the relinquishing and receiving fund company, outlining that you placed a wire order number, that you placed a wire order through WealthServ for the ICT. And then on T+1, you would have to place an inquiry in the system. I'll show you that after we go through this, just from a few screenshots. But you can basically ensure that the buy will happen on T+1. So what happens in the background is that WealthServ will place the buys automatically on T+1 once the redemptions are settled by the relinquishing fund company, and you don't have to follow up on any subsequent buys or wait for a check, etc. So this applies to RSP, for example, RSP to RSP transfers or open to RSP. There's a number of different transfer types that WealthServ allows for ICT. So let me just bring over the screen. So in order to place a WealthServ ICT. Unfortunately, you can only do this in back office currently. So under FundServ Trade, there's a group orders area where you can create a new group order. I'm just going to switch to my screenshots just to make things a little faster and just to show you kind of the process, because there is some responses that FundServ will provide during the process. So it's better just to do it through screenshots. So you would find the client. And once you find the client, you can then select the plan that they have. This will only filter on plans that are eligible for ICT trades. And from there, you can select the holdings that is currently in the account for the redemption. From there, you can select the amount value. So similar to a normal redemption, you put in the amount value. If it's, let's say, percent, you can also put a percent. You can add other cells as well for other holdings, as well as remove them if you, let's say, make a mistake. And then from there, you can then go to the buys tab. The buys tab will then, you would have to specify which plan the proceeds are going into. And you would select an applicable plan. In this case, I selected RSP. You can then search for a specific product that you're buying. So you can select or you can search for it by the fund code, and then you would put in the percent. So here you would put in, you can put in 50, 10, 20. As long as everything adds up to 100%, you can then save the ICT trade. There are also other options. If, let's say, this was a new seg contract, you could put in the seg fund details. In this particular screenshot, it doesn't show that, but it is available. So this next screenshot shows that. So if it is a seg fund, you can put those details in, and you can then add another buy if that's required. You then have to save the in-cash transfer. And once it's saved, you can then click process to then stage the order. So after you click process, this trade will end up in the operations order processing area under the pending tab. So it doesn't send it automatically directly to FundServ right away. What it's going to do is it will wait for somebody to manually send that staged trade. And you can select the trade and send it off to FundServ. At that point, you should get a response from FundServ and the fund company for the redemption part of the ICT trade. So in this case, we would have gotten a accept order for the sell side. And then on T+1, the next day, we should get a response for the purchase side of the ICT trade. So what's going to happen is it's going to sit in this particular trade will sit in the processing tab until you, on the next day, you do an inquiry on that trade. And once you do an inquiry, once you get a response for the buy side of the trade, it will go into the accepted tab. So once it's accepted, fully accepted, the ICT trade is done. You should, on T+0, send or fax the associated documentation to the relinquishing and the receiving fund companies with the associated wire order number, in this case down here. And that's it. It's a fairly efficient method. There's no follow-up really required. There's no mailing of checks back and forth. So it's a fairly efficient way of doing client name transfers between two different fund companies. Next, I'm going to, so there are a few limitations right now in the system. The sells and buys are limited to only the same client. Unfortunately, we don't allow a client, even if it's the same client from rep A to another rep B. That may come down that should come down the road in our roadmap, but currently it's just limited to the same client code. We also don't enforce any sort of settlement periods. If you go to the wiki article, which I'll display after, there is a number of requirements that will limit, what types of plans you can go to, as well as give you a rule table as to what settlement periods the sells have to be, as well as the buys. So for example, you can't do money market sells, and because the settlement period is shorter than the buy side of the funds. So there is a wiki article in there. If you have access to Wiki or Confluence, there's full screenshots, as well as kind of a table of the ownership matrix. So I click on that quickly. I'll just show you what that looks like. So we have like an ownership matrix. So for example, a joint can go to joint, individual can go to individual, as well as the types of accounts that you can transfer from and to. So there are a few rules. Now, WealthServ will reject it if these rules aren't met, obviously. Our system does try to enforce some of the rules, but things like the settlement periods, we are yet to enforce. Next functionality I want to talk about is the EFT or pre-authorized debit functionality. This particular functionality was introduced about 1.5 years ago. There has been pretty good uptake for some dealers. However, there are some dealers that don't use it at all. And it's actually a very good way to save money on mailing of checks, because most of you guys are doing client name business. You probably receive checks from clients for any sort of new purchases or new contributions to their accounts. And you are required to send these checks to the fund company for purchase settlement within T+2 or within 2 days, or else the trade gets canceled. So one of the things that the EFT pad allows you to do is save the banking information on the client, and the fund company can do a pre-authorized debit on the account so that they can settle the purchase without having to receive a check or a physical check to settle the purchase. So you don't have to mail anything. You can fax your documentation to the fund company, and they can take care of the settlement. So instead of couriering your checks, you can just send the send the EFT information to them. So I just quickly show you where that information or how the trade can be placed and where you can put in the EFT information. So within the organizer clients area, there is a EFT button within the details of the client. This is where all of the EFT details are stored. Unfortunately, again, this is only available in the back office. RepVision does not have the ability to view or store or add EFT information at this point. But within here, you can add different bank accounts that are associated with the particular client. So before you place any trades, put in the institution, all of the void check information should be placed in the EFT area of the client. And from there, when you're placing a trade, there will be an option when you add the client check to the purchase. So those of you who are familiar with placing purchases, there is an area to credit the account. Usually you would put in the check information. There is a pad option. So if you check the pad radio checkbox, you'll be able to find the the EFT information that you've input for the particular client. From there, you would put in the full amount of the pre-authorized debit. So if you, let's say, have 4 purchases of $1,000 each, put in $4,000. So similar to putting in a check, it's as you need to let the system know what the full amount of the purchase is. So select the account, put in the full amount, and then you can then place your purchase. So at the bottom of the purchase screen, under client checks, you'll see an option for the check that you just input. So in this case, we have a $1,000 pad for this particular purchase. And then you place your trade as per usual. Now, what the system will do is it will include this pad information or EFT information with this particular purchase, and the fund company should then place the purchase and settle it accordingly without the need for a physical, excuse me, a physical check. So again, some limitations. Like I said, it's not available in RepVision, and the redemption with EFT functionality is not yet available. That is on our roadmap, but currently we're only able to do the EFT pad for purchases at this point. And we also, again, have a Wiki Confluence article that describes how to put in the pad information. So both of these functionalities are kind of time savers, as well as should help you save money in the long run, and hopefully gets more adoption going forward. If there are any issues with these new functionalities, or you see it having to operate in a different way, please let us know. Or maybe it's not working for you. It's we introduced the functionality for you guys to use, but and kind of we're hoping to get more adoption. But if there's any issues that are stopping you from adopting it, please let us know, because without letting us know, it's kind of hard to kind of fix the issue. Because like I said, there are dealers that are using it, but there are definitely dealers that haven't put in any of anything for either of these functionalities. So with that, if there are no other questions, I'll pass it back to Diana.
Excellent. Thank you, Roddy. We had a couple of questions in the chat. I answered a couple of them, but just wanted to reiterate, the EFT function is not available in RepVision at this point. We would like to put it on the roadmap. We'd like to make sure we understand that there is a desire for that, because the EFT function hasn't been significantly used since it was put into back office. I guess, Roddy, that was in the early summer release, I believe.
Yeah, so actually, I'm just going to share some stats with you guys that kind of are. Let me see if I can share it again. So I did kind of go through our system and across all dealers. So for example, it's the ICT functionality is available since July. There were 900 potential cases. So things like RSP to RSP, open to RSP, open to open, etc. And it was only used 60 times. And some dealers have not used it at all. So some, have used it. However, some have not used the functionality. And I'm sure there's, a lot of cases there. And same for EFT. It was available for a year and a half now. It's utilized 1,300 times, but some dealers use it 700 times, which is good, but then some have used it less than 25 times over the past year and a half. And some have done 0. So,
that's great to see, Roddy, because I think, the purpose of this is really to find out what might be stopping you from using it. Is it a lack of awareness that it's there? Is there some operational issue that is stopping you from using it? So I'd like to understand that, if you can help us, see if we can help you maybe utilize that. A couple of the questions or comments were that not all carriers take the one-time pad, and yes, I can appreciate that, but that's unfortunately we can't provide any leverage there. Carriers do. I'm sure everybody has a list of operational exceptions of carriers that 12 carriers will do this and 1 carrier will not. But for those that do accept it, it would be nice to know if there is something in the system itself that's stopping you from being able to use it. With that, John had also answered. You can see Stephen had a question about updating the MGID and the FIT tool, and John has answered that question for everybody and provided the current fields that can be updated. So the current fields for the broker can update address, phone numbers, email, banking information, comp grid, and tags, and the synopsis and the hierarchy. So if there are no other questions, feel free to stay and put them in the chat if you'd like. I'll leave this meeting open for a little while. If you haven't got to the questions, you're welcome to email myself, Roddy, or John after as well. We will be taking these questions and putting them in a document for you to make available post session. I think we can upload a document to our landing page, but I'll find that out. The recording will be available post-session as well, and we'll make sure that all of our participants know where that is when it's available. Really appreciate you taking the time. I know how busy everybody is and how hard it is sometimes to fit in yet another Zoom, Teams, video chat of your choice call. And hopefully it has been of some help and given you a taste of, perhaps not precisely what the system can do, but if it can do some of these things, there's probably a lot more it can do that you may not be aware of or not familiar with or haven't been able to fit it into your operational processes yet. So if there's a challenge that you find within your business, managing data, operationally doing transactions, let us know and we'll see if we can help you with an existing feature that you might not be aware of. With that, I'm going to thank you again and wish you a great afternoon. Thanks, everybody.